everyone. All right, so it is 10:34, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. So this is our official good morning, good morning. Thank you guys for joining us today. I am so pumped up to have you here. So welcome to the Student Voice panel with Nearpod and Flocabulary. So this session is going to be in the format of a panel discussion with plenty of opportunity for you guys to participate and kind of ask your own questions as well. So I'm going to get started by introducing myself first. So my name is Tiana Conaway Manson, aka T, and I am currently a Flocabulary specialist. There is so much happening with Flocabulary behind the scenes right now, and I am super excited to get to be a part of it. As I told you guys, I did serve as a classroom teacher. I taught fourth grade every year that I was in the classroom, and I served in Prince George's County and Baltimore County, Maryland. I taught elementary school, relay mostly. So literacy is always like front of mind for me. No matter what we talk about, I'm probably always going to bring it back to reading somehow. I am also a spoken word artist. So my love of like rhythm, rhyme, figurative language, it all really sets the stage for my educational foundation. I recently graduated from Bowie State University, also in Maryland, with my Master's of Education in Culturally Responsive Teacher Leadership. Thank you. So I'm super excited to continue doing the work necessary for equity, access, and inclusion in our schools. Okay, so that's a little bit about me. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it to our panelists so that they can introduce themselves in no particular order. Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm so excited to see you all here. I am Leticia Citizen. I'm an I4 coach and sort of like an instructional technology coach, and I teach digital citizenship for every student at our school. So I push in where I meet with every class, TK5, for 30 minutes every 2 weeks. So I work at Hawthorne School and Beverly Hills Unified School District here in Southern California. I just completed my 22nd year as an educator, where I've taught a long time, where I've taught kindergarten for 2 years. I've taught first grade for 7, fifth grade for 9, and I've been in the role as a coach. This will be my 5th year starting out in that role. I've taught in Pasadena Unified School District for 16 years, worked in Arcadia for 2, and now I've kind of found my home in Beverly Hills. We'll see how long, I'm there, being able to share all things DIDSIT, all things equity, inclusion, diversity, and also about like bringing the love of music, the love of our students and their love of music into the classroom, and how we can do that in an engaging way. Like T said, just let them flow, let them get the rhythm, and just allowing them to be creative. Thanks for all the congratulations in the chat too. I'll pass it over to Rashida.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Rashida Brereton, and I am joining you from the beautiful island of Barbados. I am an English and theater arts teacher, as well as a theater practitioner. I'm a performer. I love performing, and that is a part of me wherever I go. So I bring that into the classroom. I love student engagement. I love student voice. Their voice matters to me in all ways. And I use performance to bring that out of everyone in my classes. So I'm really happy to be here and share with you guys. Yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Rashida.
And I guess it's my turn. So hi, everyone. I'm Becky Chesmezia. I taught music for 17 years, half at the middle school level, half at the elementary. And now I'm on my 3rd year as an instructional technology coach at Henry Lord Community School in Fall River, Massachusetts. And I'm very passionate about amplifying student voice. So I'm excited for this discussion.
Absolutely, yes. So let's give it up for our panelists. Again, we have a dynamic panel. You guys are going to learn so much. We're going to get so much insight, and I'm super excited. So if you are logged into the Nearpod, there is a collaborate board. So always feel free throughout our discussion to drop some of your extending questions into the collaborate board, and we'll fit them in throughout. And then if we can't get to it there, then, you know, we might drop them at the end. So I just want you guys to make sure that you're engaged, listening to our panelists, and we are going to go ahead and get started. All right. So our very first question, which only seems appropriate, is what does student voice mean to you? So before we get into student voice and the ways that Nearpod and Flocabulary can help amplify it, let's define it. So what does student voice mean to you? Let's start with Rashida.
Okay. For me, it's giving students an opportunity to show their thoughts, their opinions, what they feel like about the culture of the classroom, the subject, the school environment, and what's happening in the country that they're in and the world at large. So for me personally, it's not just about what's happening in that particular subject, but it's about everything. It's giving them an opportunity to really tell us and show us how they feel about what's happening to them as well as what's happening to us. That's it in a nutshell for me, you know, making sure that they have an opportunity to share, because they don't get it many other places.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree with you, Rashida. I definitely think it is, or, you know, I definitely practice in this idea of like really letting students bring in their voice, really bringing in their stories too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that student voice is them telling their stories, not necessarily regurgitating what we're teaching them, but allowing them to bring in themselves in many ways, letting them be storytellers, right? And I always like to say that, and I say this to my students, even now that I'm outside of the classroom, but still pushing in and I'm meeting with every class at our school, I let my students know that our voices are going to work in tandem, right? So we're going to lend our voices in our learning spaces to build a community voice. And that I always like to say, and I know I've got some musical people here, that sometimes it's a symphony and sometimes our voices are just a whole bunch of cacophony going on, but like we're all going to be here to share it, and we're going to learn from it, and we're going to build how we're going to navigate our learning space for the entire school year.
Absolutely.
And to add on to that, just making sure that every student feels welcome. When they're able to share their voice, they feel like they belong, right? And you're able to learn more when you feel like you belong and that you're a part of the community. And part of the way I do that is like I allow for not only opportunities that I'm like asking for their specific voice, but then giving them choices in how they're learning. So choices within assignments and projects and all those areas.
Absolutely. I think all of you guys have excellent points. When we go over to our collaborate board, you know, our teachers are also saying, meaning that students are directing their own learning, that they're having a say in the way that they take in this information, giving them an opportunity to show that they understand it, that authentic assessment, things like that. It seems like we all have these different exact definitions of student voice, but we all know how involved the process is. Okay,
Yeah,
and
because
sometimes
they
I
really
don't.
need to,
Go ahead.
sorry, because
No, go ahead.
really
No,
need
go
to
ahead.
feel included, you know,
Right.
and not like if they're just there along for the ride, but how is it that we can make sure that they feel like if they are a part of the process, going together and not just there being tugged along, like, come on now, this is what you're supposed to be. This is what you're supposed to have right now. So we're not spoon feeding them, but we're allowing them to kind of figure out what is it that they want to eat and how.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I see that one of our viewers also said that they're a part of the construction process. You know, you're building something, but they're a part of the construction process. And I always love these analogies that, you know, people come up with, but they all really say the same thing, that students are involved in their own learning. Okay, so we are going to go ahead. Let's move on to our next question. So personally, everybody's about to gear up for back to school, right? That's what's on everybody's mind. Teachers are, kind of in that phase where even if they're not going back till after Labor Day, like midsummer, your teacher brain turns back on and we're all gearing up to go back to school and everything like that. So for teachers preparing to go back to school, how do you think that they can emphasize student voice in how they set up their classroom? And then I also want to put an asterisk on that with how might this differ for teachers who travel between different classes. You don't have your own space to do it. So how might that look different for them? Oh, Rashida, I know you said you wanted to tap in on this one, so you can kick us off.
Okay. For me personally, I don't have a classroom that's just mine, so here in Barbados in my class, I have to go around to the different classrooms. What I love to do, which was also mentioned in one of the sessions right before this one, is to send out a newsletter, right? So I send out a newsletter to my parents, to the students to say, hey, welcome, especially if I'm a form teacher, to say, this is what the expectations are for this year. Looking forward to hearing from you. What are some of the things you would like to see happen? Or what are some of the topics you would like to see covered? Which book would you like to start with? Because I'm an English teacher as well, right? Giving them that option, I find is pretty cool, so that they have a kind of ownership to the class. And it's not just me dictating how the ride is going to take place. What I like to do as well, because I'm not in a physical class, sorry, not a physical class, but because I don't only have my classroom, is how we start each lesson. Then it's a way for me to kind of get to know them, to get to learn what they like, what they don't like, so that I can integrate those things into the lesson to make it unique to them. So they might like to sing, they might like to dance, so how can those things help me to bring the lesson to life for them? And then when it comes to their voice, how can we allow them to share their thoughts on the different things that we're doing? So when they're sharing their thoughts, then we can allow them to put post-its on the board if we're in a classroom, or we can allow them to send kind of their responses so that everybody is able to see them, which is something we'll get to a little bit later in terms of how we can use Nearpod and Flocabulary. But making sure that they have opportunities within the entire term and not just at the beginning when we set up, to lend their voice to the process, So most times we ask them something at the beginning and then we forget all about their thoughts and opinions on the way through. But because I don't have a class, I have to make sure that I am embedding those moments in every lesson that I have. And I had for theater arts, I kind of have a circle, we check in on mornings so that they can lend their voices to a topic or a theme or whatever. And then I had a teacher who used to start with a game every single class, and I've really taken that on from my classes as well, so that we start with that game, and that game is linked to what we're going to learn, but now I have a kind of idea of the direction that they want to go in, or the thoughts that are in their head on that particular topic, and then I can kind of infuse it as we go through. So those are the ways that I kind of skirt a tail around that, because I don't have my an actual class for myself.
Rashida,
I love that.
sorry.
No,
Rashida,
go ahead.
That's the same boat too, where I push into every classroom. So I was going to say, when I was self-contained and I had my own classroom, and I shared this with y'all when we were prepping, that what I did in the classroom is I kind of set up the paper on the wall, right? But I never filled it in with anything, because I wanted my students to know that they were going to fill in those walls. I wanted them to own what was going on in the classroom. And that meant also, what goes up on the wall? What do you want to display? So one thing I would do is, like, when I bring the students in, we would take time to just look around the classroom, because something else that I did was I had, flexible seating going on. So there were certain things that I was very intentional about, but I would bring the kids in and say, all right, I want you to look around and tell me, what do you notice? And what do you wonder? And so kids always notice, well, you have nothing on the wall except for the paper. And I'm like, so why do you think this is going to happen? And they would give their different thoughts, and I would tell them, because that's going to be your space. Now, I did have like my own little space where I would put up, because I would, go out to conferences and I was attending PD, and I wanted them to show that I was learning along with them and doing my own personal learning. So I would post things there for myself. But otherwise, I told them, this is our classroom. This is what we're going to build together. That included, coming up with our expectations. How are we going to function in this space together? I know that a lot of people talk about, a safe space, but I really like to highlight the brave space, right? Because we're going to all come in and bring all these different parts of us. And sometimes it's traumatic, sometimes it's happy. We're just all coming from different ways, but we want to be able to be brave and share in that space. And I also acknowledged, and I tell my students, how we function today, my hope is that at the end of the 180 days that we've brought in most parts of ourselves, because, we've built a community of respect. We've built a community of, learning and progressing, and definitely moving from one perspective to a new perspective that includes all the stories that we've learned from each other. So, day one, I know people are talking about day one. Yes, day one, they can see. And so even now that I do push in, I ask my teachers, can I still have a space that we are going to fill in together remember I teach digital citizenship. So how can I do that? But like you, Rashida, that, I use Nearpod, that first lesson is a check-in. Go ahead and draw how you're feeling. Go ahead. Is there something? I love always, checking in every 4 to 8 weeks where I'm asking, what is it that we want to keep in our class? What is it that we want to start in our class? And what is it that we want to stop in our class? And like you point out, Rashida, taking that feedback and really going ahead and finding trends and then making those changes, because we want our students to see we're just not asking them to do this just because, but we're going to do something with this information too. So that's really something that I love. If we're going to say that this is their learning space, then we definitely need to do it together in tandem. What about you, Becky?
Yeah, just thinking of what you were saying with using that information, how important it is when you ask for student voice that you acknowledge it, right? And that if it's not something you want to go along with, you acknowledge it and you maybe explain the rationale for going a different avenue. But you never want to ask for it and then just ignore it, right? Because that breaks trust. When I was a music teacher and I had 28 different classes and 6 different grade levels, I would use a collaborate board for each grade that we kind of kept an ongoing bulletin board within Nearpod, because I couldn't have everything up for 800 kids, right?
Right.
So we had our own classroom space digitally. So.
Absolutely. I'm just dropping a couple of our gems in the chat again. So leaving that space for students to contribute to classroom culture and the actual physical decoration of the classroom, using the feedback that you get from students, and then embedding that culture of the student voice into multiple lessons throughout the year. Right.
And
so
and Becky said something as well. Leticia would have mentioned a symphony, creating a symphony as we bring their voices together. And I want us to remember as teachers that we're kind of the conductors, right? We got to make sure that when they're sending their voices out there to us, that we then make it a nice, beautiful experience, and not that we're just kind of leaving all the voices all about and just, it becomes noise, it becomes chaos, but we then have to take all of their voices and help them to mold it together, to form a unified front. And Becky mentioned that, we don't just leave it out there. We can't, because we need to then guide their voices and not drag them to say, this is what you're supposed to think. But why do you think that way? Can you share your thoughts with us? And if it isn't that they don't know how to articulate it, then create a space where you help them to kind of figure out what it is that they're thinking and help them to process it in their heads, because they don't really get that opportunity in many other places where they get to share their voice and then explore that feeling. So we're the conductors that kind of brings everything together at the end of it all.
I love that. And I know that, like you said, students don't always get the opportunity to use their voices in other spaces. I don't know about you guys, but I came from the children should be seen and not heard generation of parent rearing. So there were not a lot of opportunities where it was like, we want to hear what it is that you're thinking. And then taking it a step farther, like Rashida said, to even explore that. Well, why do you think that? What can we do with that information? How can we change what it is that we're doing in order to incorporate how it is that you're thinking and you're feeling? And I know that as teachers and educators and instructional coaches and things like that, we have our lesson plans and we're like, yep, this is what I'm going to go in and do today. But I think that we all know that that flexibility and being able to adapt and using what the students give you to guide what it is that how your conversation goes after that is such a critical skill. So thank you guys so much for sharing all of that. So let's get into Nearpod and Flocabulary. So I do want to know from our panel, how have you used Nearpod and or Flocabulary to promote student voice and student choice? I think I made Rashida start the last couple of them. So
She disappeared. I think that was her way of being like, oh, am I going first? I was gonna say definitely with Nearpod, you've got, oh my gosh, you've got options, right? So with the open-ended question, I love now that students can actually record audio, right? So I love like having that option there and seeing the students who choose to go that route versus going ahead and typing. I do love to, so with my K2, we have iPads that they use. And I love watching the kids use the microphone to then like dictate and read their sentence and then types out for them. Oh my gosh. The thing is, I love in the beginning, I don't like explain it to kids that they have those options. I always tell them like, push on all the buttons, friends. And if it explodes, then you know not to push that button again, right? We've definitely moved. I mean, I'm going to age myself. I was born at a time where we started to transition into computers. And in that beginning time, you press the wrong button and the whole thing shut down. And so I have a lot of teachers who are still in that mentality, and I have to tell them like, we've moved from that. Like we really have. And that like, we do want to encourage students to go ahead and like click on everything. And I'm big on that. So just letting them explore, especially like I said, on the open-ended question, they have the option to type, they have the option to record their voice, they can upload images. Then you've got, the collaborative slide. I love that because then they can interact with each other and really opening up that space. And again, because I teach Digsit, like really having students, I know that we can moderate it. So in the beginning, I do kind of moderate it. And I tell them I'm not moderating so that way I can police what they're saying. I'm moderating to make sure that we're being respectful in this based on how we say things, right? And so, if I notice that Rashida is not using such kind words, then I'll go over and be like, hey, is there another way that you can like write this? So that way we're not like insulting others, and having those conversations and then allowing them to go in and make some edits. That is another thing, right? Now they can edit their response, which is amazing. So really leveraging, the collaborative board, the open-ended slide. You've got even just the draw. Oh my God, the draw it slide. That's another one that it's got so many options. And again, my students, especially you can kind of tell what kind of spaces that their learning spaces that they're in, because then they'll ask me, like, well, is it okay if I can use this? Is it all right? And I'm like, hey, free range, right? Like as long as you're answering the question, or you're giving me your ideas, or you got your own questions, go ahead and how you want to share that. That's I definitely love that we have those different options in Nearpod.
Absolutely. Thank you. Becky?
Yeah, so I'll share, because it sounds like Leticia did a little bit more from K-2, but I'll share like a 7th grade example from this year. So not only allowing like the different choices of the different tools within Nearpod, but also letting them choose like the task they're completing. I'm gonna drop a link in the chat for if anybody wants to check it out. This was a student choice Nearpod with VR. that the students did based off of our novel of The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. And they were getting background information on Native American reservations and the school back then and what this all looked like. But the students got to choose which VR experience they did. Then that led them to a graphic organizer and a writing prompt within the Nearpod. And then when they were done, they had to go read the other group's collaborate board and comment. So they got both pieces of information. So that's a way to make it work with some older students, that you're allowing some student choice and voice and getting it through Nearpod. And it was great because it was so streamlined. Everything was like right in this one link.
This is really great, Becky. Thank you for sharing.
My pleasure. There's a lot of planning.
I'll hit up Flocabulary then, since we spoke about Nearpod just now. I love the sounds on Flocabulary, right? It's a vibe for me. So I can only imagine how my students feel, right? And to be able to use that type of songs, those types of songs anyway, is really awesome, because usually we are shunning away from certain things. But being able to see hip hop used to educate is so amazing for me. So big up to the Flocabulary team and the way in which it's structured, so you actually have a lesson that you can actually use for a particular topic or theme that you're working on. I love especially when they get to create their raps at the end, and that's how I use it for student voice. And sometimes I might just ask them to use the tune and create my own words based on the theme that I'm using, but get them to use the melody that's in there to create something based on a topic that we were using. And I love that, because it's not then just me giving them a summary, but they're now creatively, because you know, I'm theater, they're now creatively showing me what they learned by creating that sound for themselves. And that's what I love about Flocabulary, because I'm spitting out to you what this thing is about. We're going through a lot of things just so that you can understand how it's put into context. And then I want you to spit out to me. So after all of that, what do you get? Right? What do you understand? What do you know? And it's so amazing for me how each person has the same words as the beginning, and by the end of it, everybody has a completely different rap. And I think that in itself is so amazing and so cool. And it shows individuality. It shows how they are processing the information. It shows how they are able to articulate things for themselves. And it also shows the diversity that you have in your classroom. Whatever they are exposed to is what you are actually going to get in that rap. So if they're exposed to too many different things that you're like, what? At your age, that's what you know about, then it allows you to make a note to the side to say, okay, I got to check in on this. Right. And then if they're not sure about certain things, you're like, okay, look, maybe I should plan a class trip to X so that I can help expose them to Y. Because from their rap, you realize that they don't really have that deep understanding of a particular thing that they should have, right? And then you get to share their voices with each other, which is also something that you guys mentioned just now for the collaborate board, which I love, by the way. But it allows them to hear each other and their view on a particular topic or theme. And it brings aha moments like, oh yeah, you know, I remembered something because of somebody else's rap. So right. I really love Flocabulary, especially for the opportunity for them to then share and create something on their own.
Absolutely. I think, and you know, I gotta go into vocabulary a little bit more with the lyric lab and everything. But you know, when I was in the classroom, we had freestyle Fridays. And because vocabulary does give you an entire lesson sequence, we would literally be going through each of the activities all week. It follows Bloom's taxonomy. So literally from remember to create. creating at the end with Lyric Lab, and it was amazing. Like just seeing their growth and their progression from like our first Freestyle Friday where they're kind of like, this man said, I don't know, to like by June, they're like, all right, yup, we got mics, we got props. They're like in it, you know? And like Rashida said, giving them the opportunity to let you know what they know. And it's so impactful. And even with Lyric Lab, it doesn't just have to be raps, right? So I used it for my poetry lesson. We used it to, you know, do spoken word, written poetry. If you just want to tell me a story, and that's what I used to tell my kids, like hip hop is just storytelling anyway. So you literally, if you don't want to rap, because everybody's not the, you know, hype man, get up, flow kind of person. So if you just want to tell me a story, still using those vocabulary words, you can still use the rhyme generator that's inside of Lyric Lab, but I want you to show up authentically, whatever that means for you. And I think vocabulary really gives students and teachers the opportunity to show up authentically and really use their voice.
And you mentioned something there just now in terms of the Bloom's taxonomy, and I think that's what I love so much about it, because it starts from one point and then builds them right up to the top, and really hits home at that higher order thinking skills. Because I think a lot of the times we are so focused on them regurgitating information, which is totally on the other coin, on the other side of the coin when we're thinking about student voice, right? Because when they're regurgitating, it's teacher led. But if we're helping them and building it to the point where then they give us something back, then, you know, it's student centered, where we're really building this around them. And don't forget, we would have started to talk to them for a long time before, or at the beginning of the lesson. So we've started to already build things around their likes and you know, interest in the world. So I really love the fact that we are able to hit those higher order thinking skills instead of just asking them to spit back out exactly what we would have told them.
Absolutely. I think it shows such a higher level of comprehension there. You know, like you really get it. Like you can't write a rap about something that you don't know nothing about. That was always my like intro to it. Like you can't tell me anything about it if you don't know about it. Right. And personally, you know, like I said, I'm a spoken word artist. So like rapping with my students and things like that, that was always like the showstopper, right? They would come in, they might not really be feeling it, but then I bust out one and then they're like, what is going on, you know? And every teacher isn't like that. But even that, I encourage you to let your students know, hey, hip hop isn't really my thing. I don't even really know what I'm doing. I guarantee you, at least one of your students is going to volunteer to teach you how to do it. Put them in that driver's seat. Give them the voice and the choice to be like, okay, let me show you how to do something. And I don't think no matter what grade they're in, students love the opportunity to teach their teacher something, because they really do think you know everything. So when you get into that authentic space of like, this isn't my expertise, and you let them teach you something, using their voice in that way, I just feel like it's so impactful in that way.
And I think, Tiana, you're also saying like, once we, you know, hand over the wheel to the students, then we need to go ahead and try it, right? Mm-hmm. Like, still don't sit in that space of like, oh no, I can't do it. Like, go ahead, be vulnerable, try it out. Because again, if we're allowing them to be the teacher for us, then we want to show them, all right, so I'm gonna, you know, we're asking them to do this all the time. Why not go ahead and be in that space too? And so like you, Tiana, like you said, Rashida too, when the students are creating, I'm creating as well. And, you know, they want to battle. Once you like try that one time, they're like, okay, we're going to come in, you know, and they're ready to go. They're ready to like show up and show out. And you got to step up to the game. Even if you're not like confident in it, this is still showing them how we work through this learning process and being able to show up. So definitely, I would say not only allow your students, they're going to challenge you. They want to see you do it, but go ahead and take those times and don't just do it one time. Come back again, you know, show them that like, all right, I'm ready now, and try it. I mean, it's such a fun environment that and it solidifies the relationship even more, I think, in a way that you would have never thought that you could. So
And they love to see
Absolutely.
it. They love to see you being crazy. They
They
love to
do.
see you
They love
exploring.
it.
For me, for the vocabulary lyric lab, I love to do it as well. And I would mess up purposely and then be like, that didn't rhyme. Can you help me? And
Mhm.
it's amazing to see then the different options that I could have to slot in. And then they feel
Mhm.
good about life, like, look, we just helped Mrs. Burton in class.
Right.
And
Right.
they feel like, okay, I learned something. And that in itself is pretty cool. I love what you just said, Leticia and Tiana. We have to model for them. If we're just sitting there and dictating what they're supposed to do or asking them to do something and not willing to do it for ourselves, then we are fools. And I'm sorry, we really are, because
That's it.
we really are not connecting them with them in any form or fashion, right? We really have to show them that we are also vulnerable, that we always we don't know everything, and that we're here to learn as well. Sometimes I'm asked a question and I would tell them, well, I'm not really sure about that. I would have to research it. Or could you research it and come back and share it with the class, so that they
Mhm.
then feel like it's okay, no problem. And then when they come to share it the next time, it's like, look, I had a nugget that I was able to share. I'm as important as the teacher. And one more thing, for me, if I go through the topics of the term or themes I have to go through, what I love to do in a particular theme is give it over to the students. So I will put them into groups and I would allow the students then to come and teach for that particular class. I would then come back at the end of the lesson or the lesson after to give further details and areas that I think they would have missed out, but they take it, they run with it, and it's different, it's unique. It's not me that's teaching it, it's them, and they're bringing their voice, they're bringing their thoughts, and they've put it into a nice package, and but that they are excited when that happens.
Absolutely. So I did see a really good question in the chat that I wanted to get you all's opinion about. So M. Foxworth asked, in the midst of providing these opportunities for sharing their own voice, how do we ensure they are understanding that while their voice is no less important than others, neither is it more important? What do you do to be sure there's an active growth in the areas of community and empathy? So I think Leticia was talking a lot about that brave and safe space. So if you guys just wanted to expound upon that a little bit, like how do you make sure that each student voice is heard, that no particular students are thinking their voice is more important than others?
I don't know how to answer the question exactly, except that we put it as an expectation that we take space and make space. So having the students take a moment to reflect, what are you doing more of? Do you need to step up right now and take more space in the room? Or do you need to take a step back and make space for others to share their voice? And just kind of giving them that moment to like do a little self-check.
I love that.
I'm with Becky. We definitely, that's always, and students, I love when I do like talk about making space and taking space, they're always like, what does that mean? And I'm always fascinated for the students who are like real intentional about it. They're like, so does that mean that like I have like 25% of the space? Like, I have those who are like thinking, mathematically about it. And I'm like, we'll see, like, we'll show, and then I have some students who will start talking. They're like, wait, was I talking too much? Do I need to make space for someone else? And the kids would be like, no, just continue. But I will say that I've ran into, I know like my last 2 years of being in the classroom and teaching 5th grade, I had a couple of students who struggled with that for a minute, with understanding that what they had to say wasn't more important than anyone else. And so it would come through where, they would be like, well, nah, Tiana, that's not it at all. Like, no, you don't even know what you're talking about. Or we'd I'll always have the conversation too about like, just because I may not vocalize, using my vocal cords to express what I'm saying, I can do it, I can go ahead and write it, or these different forms of sharing our voice and what that looks like and making space for that too. And it's a constant like conversation. What I love is that, especially in those last 2 years of being in the classroom, that I didn't have to do much of the like reminding or the teaching about like sharing and taking space. Like the students will hold each other accountable. They would say like, Rashida, like we really need to talk, or they would come to me and say, hey, can we talk about this some more? Because we noticed today, and it was funny because like, it just wasn't like 1 or 2 students. It would be like half of the class that would be like,
Right.
can we please call a meeting to like talk about this, right? And then them learning how to do that without, like they wanted to call folks to the carpet without like calling them to the carpet, right? They didn't want to like center them, and it's a learning process. And I think that we've all been talking about like modeling this from day one and just reiterating those things, and then just calling out like those couple times that it happens, like, let's talk about like I would do reflection Mondays about the week before. And so students would do these different activities where, you know, they were like, we would use Seesaw to upload like certain, just even if they weren't completed, like any activities that they worked on last week. But in part of that reflection was also about like, how did we function as a class? And then how did you function individually as a class? And not only did we do it on Mondays, but a lot of times after certain activities, we would also do it. Especially like when we were sharing, like if it was a lyric lab or if it was something like that, you know, like allowing them time to debrief. And that's when that conversation would come up about, you know, like, do we all, that was one of the questions, do we all have space to share? And then I would ask, like, did you feel like you were heard today? And they would go ahead and talk about that. And then we would explore it the next day too, about like, this is what I noticed. Here were some of our response, depending on how we responded, right? Sometimes it was on Nearpod and Collab. Maybe it was Post-its. Rashida, you talked about that. Like just having those different forms of them being able to share together in the same space and then have those conversations. It's not, we're not like kumbaya, it happens. And sometimes it takes some students longer, but by the end, it's always interesting to see how like they all start to hold each other accountable for that.
Absolutely.
I one thing that you guys were talking about too is the culture of the classroom that you create. You as a teacher create the culture of your space. So if you allow it to happen more than once, then it will continue to happen. But once you as the teacher, which is the director of the symphony, start to build that culture where we are respecting each other. You might not agree with me, but you are going to respect my thoughts and my ideas, then that will continue throughout, you know? So for me personally, if something is starting to build in the class, then we got to pause and we got to figure out what that thing is, because all of our voices matter in here. We are all here to learn. We're all here to share. Everybody is not going to always agree with each other, but how are you going to say, well, respectfully, I respectfully disagree with what you're saying, you know? And it doesn't, you just can't be nasty. And I think that's what's needed more in the world that we're in. And we then have to teach them that culture. We have to teach them that in life, you are never going to always agree with everything that people are saying. So something as small as bickering in the English lit class, or something as small as bickering with the way we're going to use a stimulus in theater arts, that seed that is planted, we then have to kind of figure out, how do we help them water that so that they know that, okay, well, for this time, I'm going to allow you to go, you know, or I don't really agree with that, but let's try it instead of that, and start to, you know, attack at each other. But it's up to us as the directors of the class. And I love that word symphony that Leticia used. It's up to us as that director to then help them to really see how we can live as one in this world without agreeing with every single thing that that other person is saying.
Absolutely. I think all of you guys made amazing points just now and definitely thoroughly answered that question. I know that in my classroom, one thing that we always did is that there was a pause. So when somebody would say something, you're not allowed to respond immediately, because that means you already had your response locked and loaded before they even said what they were going to say. And even that authenticity, right? Because I would tell my kids, like, as an adult, you get into disagreements with people, and I'm like, y'all know, Miss Manson, I always got my response ready, but we're not in that space right now. You don't have to be defensive about your ideas. You don't have to feel like you're defending yourself, like you're separate from this. And then even just teaching them that language, like, what do you mean by that? Can you explain this more? One thing that I always encourage my students to do was so what I hear you saying is, because a lot of the time the disagreements that they ensue, y'all are really saying the same thing, but you're misunderstanding each other. So that what I'm hearing you say is, and then they'll be like, no, what I'm saying is, and just teaching them those skills, like Rashida was saying, like, these are life skills, right? You're going to take this outside of my classroom, and hopefully, we're creating better, more well-rounded conversationalists, better humans in general once they leave our classroom.
Yeah, when you hear them using it outside of the classroom, like that's that. Yeah. Those are those moments where I'm like, okay, I did my job. Like, today, I'm good for the rest of the year. Let's go.
Right.
Right. Because you're absolutely right, Tiana, like giving them those sentence starters, because I always tell my students, what they said and what you heard can be two different things. And to your point, you could be making the exact same point. You're just coming from it from a different way, right? Like you took this road, they took this road, but y'all coming to the same conclusion. And it really, you're right, like having that moment to pause, to really think. I always tell them, like, you should be processing what people say. But if you, and I know a lot of people have put this in the chat, like if you are listening to respond, then you got it all wrong, baby. We got to work on this. Right? Like, I know you've got your points. So what I like to do too, is when we are going to get into like some of those heavy conversations, or even some light ones, I'll tell them, I always give them like a Post-it or a card, and I say, what I want you to do is go ahead and jot down your main thoughts right now and any questions that you have. Because I know that no matter what any of us say right now, you're going to be holding on to those thoughts, and you're going to miss a lot of what someone's going to say. So go ahead, I'll give them like a sheet of paper, whatever you need. Go ahead and just jot down, we talk about like writing phrases, or if you want to write a whole sentence, I give them about like 2 to 3 minutes. Go ahead and write down whatever thoughts you have, whatever questions you have. So that way I don't want to dismiss those. Those are important. But what's also important is being able to hear what others are saying and process, and then we're going to work through that. And then we can come, back to your points, or maybe you're going to say the exact same thing someone else said, like giving them that space to do that. I think another life skill that they need to learn, because I do it myself. I'm like, I hurry up and I jot down, even in my marriage. I hurry up.
Right.
I gotta write this down so I don't forget, right?
But Leticia, in terms of Nearpod, you can do that now with the collaborative board because of the different columns that you have, right? And that collaborative board might just be there to trash out your ideas and thoughts. So I'm just going to spit all of these things out here. Just get everything out, guys. Put it into whatever column it's associated with, and we'll come back to that at the end of the lesson, right?
Absolutely.
We're not going to be talking about it throughout, but we're going to just use this collaborative board so that we just spit everything out there. And because we can then moderate that. So it's not just going to run out there, but we're then going to say, okay, that's not appropriate, so we're not going to post that. Or what I like to do is I kind of take everything, I wait till everybody's finished, and then I post all of them so that nobody's swayed by somebody else or whatever the case may be, but we're just going to push all of our thoughts out there. And then once my timer is up, then that's it. Time is up, guys. And I post everybody's thoughts. So being able to moderate that is pretty cool. But I definitely, I'm there with you on that. And that collaborate board, we might not even pay attention to after, but the fact that they've gotten all of their things out there. Yeah, I love that.
Absolutely.
One of the things I've done with the collaborate board, like if we're having a class discussion, is for raising other voices in the room, like the students aren't allowed to read off theirs, but find another students that you find interesting. And you can hide the name, so they're not just picking like their best friend, right? So
that part, can you say that again? Say that again. Say it again.
Hide the student names. They can't choose their best friend. They don't know who's they're saying. And and then have them share that. And I love doing that when we come back from either like small groups or individual time, and we're coming back to a class discussion. Take the time to read what other people have written, leave a comment to somebody, or share somebody else's out loud. You can't share your own.
I was just going to type it in the chat. I always tell my students, because they'll do that, right? They're like, oh, Rashida, which one did you do? And I say, no, focus on what was said, not who said it. Like, like I said, this, and I always point that out. This is what I love about Nearpod, because they're really focused on being anonymous in this space. Doesn't matter who said it. I want you to focus on what was said, and then we're going to go from there. So thank you for pointing that out, Becky, because that is like one of my pet peeves. Yes.
Absolutely.
And I would use that, Becky, as an exit ticket for me personally, right? So after we finish a class and they do their dump, or we push this collaborative board out there, and I'm asking them to respond to somebody else's post. I love that as an exit ticket to kind of get their thoughts around what did I feel about it, and then what did somebody else, how did somebody else feel about it, and comment towards that. They could have had a different opinion to you, and you could respond to explain why you agree or disagree with their thought in a respectful way, because we're still teaching them how to, work with each other. But I love that as an exit ticket.
Absolutely. So guys, we are very quickly approaching the end of our time. We've got so many great things out of this conversation. We got to ask a couple of our questions from the chat. I do want to give, if you guys are watching still, the opportunity to put a question or two in the chat if you had something that you really wanted one of our panelists to address, and we'll try to get to it very quickly. Make sure that before you exit, you guys do fill out the feedback form that I think was posted a couple times in the chat now. Let us know what you like, what we could improve on, things like that. Drop a thank you, a woohoo, or whatever in the chat if you think you got something valuable from this panel. So we are going to share the resources with you guys and inside of the Nearpod. And it's a couple of blog posts from Nearpod and Flocabulary that really speak to student voice, different ways that you can expand it in the classroom, that you can emphasize it, and things like that. So again, make sure you fill out the feedback form and use our resources. I want to give a special thank you and shout out to our panelists. You guys rocked it. All of the information that you gave. I saw so many people in the chat commending you, talking about the nuggets that you guys gave. And I think it's so important at the end of these conversations that people walk away with tangible things, right? And you guys gave them real skills, real resources, real activities, strategies that you can go use in the classroom right now. So if you're one of the people who start in school like August 1st or something like that, we got you. There are a whole bunch of panels, presentations, workshops going down for Camp Engage for the rest of the week. And so I hope you guys are going to join us. I saw a couple of people who said they were new to Nearpod, new to Flocabulary. So make sure you get in on those sessions where we're really diving into exactly what those platforms are, how to use them, how you can bring them to your school and district. The handles have been dropped. The Twitter handles, I believe, have been dropped in the chat a couple times. So, follow us on Twitter, engage, interact. If you want to add us and tell us what your favorite nugget that you took from this panel was, of course, we'll be active on there too. So thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day. Fill out the feedback form, and we will see you guys next time. All right. All right. I'll play you out. I'll play you out.
Can y'all hear the music? I can't hear the music.
You can't hear it?
I was hearing it at first, and
I
then
heard it at first. Yeah.
I was like, it's just me bopping by myself right now.
Yeah. I'm looking at it and I'm like, I want to bop too. I'm like, hey.
Okay. All right. my bad. Yeah, it's funny. It always works perfectly up until like the last second or something. Hold on. Can you guys hear it now? Can you hear the YouTube ad that's playing?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we got about 4 more seconds of that. Of course, you can hear the ad and not the music, but it's fun.
Hey, I love when I'm using Spotify in the classroom and the ad comes on. The citizen, like,
Yes.
seriously, the citizen, you can't like
You
drop
can't.
$2 for the Spotify. I'm
Like,
like,
look, that's
no.
my money though. That's mine. Okay.
You ain't gonna spend my money, no.
Right.
So then of
Absolutely.
course you get those students who are like, you can sign into mine then. Sign it. I'm like,
Right.
no, not signing into yours.
Right, because if I sign
That's
into
not
your
good
stuff,
digital citizenship.
right, exactly. Stop sharing your password with people for this.
That's what I tell them. I'm like, seriously? Do we need to talk about that today? And they're like,
Right.
what about the commercials? I'm like, you can live through commercials. We did it. I was like, I grew up in a time where we had commercials all the time. Roll with it. It's okay.
Right. Thank you guys. I see. I'm gonna drop my email in the chat just in case you guys, if you want to follow up, need anything. So
I want to take a picture. So can we cheese?
Oh yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
See, thank you for telling me, because some people just take like the screenshots and it's always when you're
And then
like
you was looking, yes.
conversation.
Then you see it on Twitter later and you're like, oh,
Right.
Oh
my
my
goodness.
gosh.
Yes, the title of this session was Student Voice with Nearpod and Flocabulary. If you're looking on it, on the feedback form, Student Voice with Nearpod and Flocabulary. And Kay, if you're saying you missed some of the session, they are all going to be recorded, so you'll definitely be able to see the whole thing. All right. Yes, and on the feedback form, you have to make sure that you're clicking on the right date, or the session won't come up. So if you're still on Tuesday, you won't see our session today on it. All right. Thank you, Clarissa. I'm so glad you guys got something from it. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you to our moderators too, Megan.
Yeah.
Yes, y'all held it down.
That
Thank
was
you.
a vibe.
Always. Y'all held it down, as always. All right.
Man.
So it is officially 11:30. I think they dropped the feedback form one more time. Hey, Lawrence from Prince George's County. Antonia, make sure that you're clicking on Wednesday
Yeah.
so that you can see the name of the session. So let me see. It is 11:31, so I am going to end the session. Ladies, thank you so much. Amazing. Truly amazing. Okay. And we'll be in contact for sure. Of course. Have a good rest of your day, everybody. All right.
Bye. Next week, go better.
Bye.
Thanks.